Hello friends, this is Cara-Renee with B.Reborn Art and Healing. This is take 2 of an I am dying to do some mixed media day, and I just tried a couple of tags using my Distress spray stains, and it was all great until I started to do some embossing on them and they were completely ruined. So I'm going to go back to my tried and true fun things to play with as far as mixed media goes, which is acrylic inks. I've got fluid acrylics here, and that's what I'm going to use today. So I'm going to show you some supplies, and I'm going to switch to a voiceover so that we have the freedom to kind of create and not worry about time so much. So I've got my gesso. I'm going to be laying down gesso all over this. I'm going to use the spatula to get it down on this paper. This is just packaging. And then I will use my brayer to spread it out. Then we will dry that, and then we'll come in with other layers of acrylic paint to create some interest. We'll be doing some stamping with both probably black and vintage photo archival inks. These are both waterproof. So I've got a little bottle of water, which may not get me very far. I may have to grab from my big bottle. I'm just not sure where it is in the studio after we put everything back in. So I'm gonna go ahead and go to the voiceover, and I hope that you enjoy. So I'm going to start by just clearing all of this stuff off of my paper. I don't remember if I mentioned it at the beginning, but this is just packaging paper that we usually have hordes of as junk journalers and mixed media artists. So I'm going to start by just crinkling it up. I want to get a lot of wrinkles. I want this to look really aged and old. And so then we're going to start with applying some gesso. So I'm going to scoop it out onto my mat here with this rubber spatula, and then I'll be using my brayer to spread it out. And what the gesso does is it allows a barrier between the paper and the mediums that you're going to be using on top. I find that it's super helpful for durability, and it creates a lot of interest just in terms of three-dimensional texture on the surface. So this was a little bit tricky because the paper wanted to move, and I already had a hole there where I was pointing, but that is okay because this is probably going to just be all cut up and used in a variety of different ways. So I'm just going to let you watch here for a moment while we finish up getting this gesso spread out all over the surface. I do apologize that the paper was bigger than my work surface, like what my camera could capture, so and have you still be able to see, not be too far away. So coming in with some golden fluid acrylic in green gold. This is one of my favorite colors because it is a great mix, kind of a yellow. It's got a lot of yellow in it, so it's kind of a spring green, which I really like. I do tone this down, so don't be concerned about how bright it is. It is a very vibrant color, but I wanted this to stay somewhat neutral and really grungy because what I intend to use it for is it needs to be grungy. So we're going to start with that, and then after we get done with this green gold, I am going to come in with I believe it's called Milky, let me see, Master's Touch Milky White, to kind of tone that color down. That green is really bold. In retrospect, when it was all done, I realized I probably did not need to do this because I lost a lot of color and in the grunge, and that's going to make more sense as we move along. So because I did not wait for that gesso to dry, I was picking up gesso on the brayer as well, so I was just getting that wiped off. So I'm going to give that a good dry. And then here's where I'm coming in with that milky white. Again, probably not necessary, but in the world of mixed media, it's really hard to know what is going to work or what is really going to meet the need. So it was not a wasted a step at all. It's kind of a beige, I guess, maybe relative to what's that called? Oh goodness, I can't even think of what it's called. Titan buff. So that's probably what it is most resembling. So, and again, really challenging to keep the paper in place because the brayer was trying to move it, and then I'm trying to hold it with one hand, trying to keep my eyes on the camera as well to make sure that I wasn't going completely off. So I did have to eventually stand up because I just couldn't get enough of the landscape covered. So I apologize. It does mean you see my body a little bit more than you're used to, which is not something that I really enjoy necessarily. So coming in with some acrylic ink, I believe this is from Daler and Rowney. It's turquoise. And so I'm going to do the same thing. And the reason why I'm doing this is because it is permanent. Acrylic ink is permanent. Acrylic paint is permanent. And I was playing earlier with, and I can't remember if I mentioned it at the beginning, I was playing around with my Distress spray stains, and they are water reactive. So I really struggle with that because I don't want to lose the color that I put down. So that's why I went to kind of my tried and true mixed media supplies that I really enjoy. I just really wanted to get messy today, and I definitely did. I have some things on my mind that I'm having a hard time kind of letting go of and decompressing from, and so doing this kind of art is really good for me. So there's just a close-up of that color. And again, we do lose a lot of that in the steps that are coming, but that is okay. As I've mentioned before, that is part of the mixed media process especially, and the layering. So this is Daler and Rowney Indian Yellow. I really wanted some light to be brought in, and again, in the final product, you can only see it in little bits. I am toying with the idea of coming back in and doing some more splatters on this large paper to bring out some of those colors. I have not decided yet what I'm going to do, but we will see. I may just do that as we use them. I'm not sure. As you saw there, I was drying in between every layer. I'm drying, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then I added some white acrylic ink because that yellow, that Indian yellow, is almost an orange. It's a super vibrant color, very good color for, it's a great artist color, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but it does tend to be a little bit bright. So as you can see, the more layers we get on here, the harder it is to control that paper. But it was fun, and I realized at some point in the process I actually took my gloves off. It was probably when I was drying or something, and I didn't put them back on, and my hands were just a wreck, really bad. So I'm gonna dry that again. And then I decided I wanted to really grunge this up, so I'm going to use my Deco Art Crackle Paint. And if you've watched any of my mixed media projects, which some of them have kind of gone over to junk journaling because I've done some mixed media in my junk journaling journey, but it adds this really beautiful crackle to the surface of whatever you're using it on. So I'm just going to get some out, kind of playing around. Again, off camera it's hard to get everything in screen, so I'm using that palette that you see off to the left. All the paint that you see on it is dried, so there's no concern about anything mixing, but I'm just spooning that crackle paint out on the palette so that I have something to work from. And then I'll be using this rubber spatula to get it all over the surface. And there's a lot of wrinkles in this paper, which I really liked. I didn't want to fuss with them because they actually make the paper itself look cracked, aside from the crackle paint. So it's really beautiful, and I hope that you'll be able to see that in some of the close-up photos at the end of the video. It's really beautiful. I love crackle paint. I scarcely can do a mixed media project without using it because it just adds this dimension of kind of an antique feel, old feel, so kind of old wall kind of stuff. So I really enjoy using it. This is a great way to get your feet wet if you want to try mixed media, but you're intimidated. It doesn't require a lot of supplies. You could use acrylic paints. You wouldn't need to use the inks and such. I just am using what I have and what I'm used to using, so you could use just acrylic paints. You could use water mediums too, like distress sprays, distress stains, and those kinds of things. So, and here's just a close-up of that crackle I believe that I walked away and let it dry. I apologize, I took my mind off of the screen here. And so that's just showing some of the cracks. Now I don't care for the white, and so I'm going to come in with a mixture of raw umber fluid acrylic and my glazing medium, excuse me. And what that does, and again, if you've watched my videos at all, I've done this before in on my channel, and it creates a glaze that you're able to paint on this brown mixture over your entire surface, and then you come in with baby wipes and wipe it back up. And what it does is it takes off the paint from where you don't want it, but that brown color settles into the cracks and all the texture that we've created and all of the steps that we've done so far. The downside of it is it did grunge up everything, so we lost a lot of the color, a lot of the green, we lost the blue completely, but again, that is just part of the process. So I just grabbed a really big brush just to get as much of this down on the surface as I could quickly, because you don't want this to sit for a terribly long time. Once I get it all on, I will come in with a lot of baby wipes and wipe it all back, and then I'll show you a close-up of what it looks like when it's all settled into the cracks and into the texture that we've created. There are probably other products you could use here. You could use a watered down, I could have used a watered down acrylic. You could do that because it would settle down, because it's more liquidy, more fluid. It would settle down into the cracks and into the textures. I just like the brown because it's what I'm used to using, and I always love the results. I'm very rarely sorry. You just don't want to do this process if you want to retain a lot of light in your project, because it does grunge down everything on the surface. So, but you'll see here in a moment what it looks like close up, and I just think it's absolutely amazing. But I'll let you be the judge of that for your own self. This is a great way to create kind of a mass mixed media paper all in one go. And I could cut this, I probably will cut this up just for storage sake into maybe 8.5 by 11 pieces, so that I can just grab if I want to use it for ephemera, if I want to use it for clusters, bases for other things. That's what I'm kind of creating it for. We'll see, because I've never done this before. The packing paper held up really well. I had a couple of tears, but when I picked the piece up, because I did take it at one point and put it outside on the table, it almost feels like leather. It's really quite astonishing that it held up so well. And so I'm just coming in with a paper towel and just kind of soaking up and getting the last bits of that wet paint off the surface. The glaze does dry fairly quickly, so I didn't have to really worry too much about that. I will give it a quick zap here just to make sure. And I'm going to show you a close-up here. I kind of slowed the video down so that you could really take a moment and look at that. So you can see the cracks, and you can see the brown paint that has settled into those cracks. It's absolutely amazing. You could also do that crackle or that glaze with any color of acrylic paint. I generally mix 1 part paint to 2 parts glazing medium to get the result that I want. So what I'm doing now is I'm coming in with my Ranger Black archival ink because it is permanent and waterproof, and I'm using my it looks like cracks, Crackle Stamp, and I'm just using that all over because it's really serving to accentuate those cracks and to create that cracked look in places that maybe I didn't have as much of the Crackle Paint, and I love it. You can see it. It is like the boldest part of this whole project, even in the end with all the grunge and all the stenciling that we're going to do here in a moment. And it was a great choice because it covered a lot of area, even though it's a small stamp. Oh goodness, I was thinking a little bit later on in the process I do go try to look for my larger black archival ink stamp. I can't find it. I know I have one though, but it would have been so nice. But working with a very small stamp, so very repetitive action here, but it is okay. And my body in the shot quite a bit here. My apologies. I'm pretty self-conscious about that, so, but you know, we're friends, right? It's okay. No sweat. I did get, so it was picking up some of that gesso and paint, so I did get some of that on my pad, but I'm not too worried about it. So there's a close-up of the Crackle with that dark color that went in, or the Crackle Stamp rather, excuse me. So I decided to come in with a couple of stencils. So the first one I'm going to do is this circle stencil, and I'm going to come in with just my vintage photo archival ink because I did want the variation. I wanted a little bit of brown color and some black. So I'm using the vintage photo here, and then I will be using the black on it with another stencil. I was not as patient as I should have been. If I had waited, I would have had better success with this process because the surface was still, it wasn't wet, but it definitely was not dry, hard dry, which would have really been beneficial. But because I was just creating grungy paper, I wasn't concerned about the end result as much as just I wanted to get a bunch of stuff down, a lot of interest in the paper, and so I wasn't too concerned about things lifting or whatever. So I'm coming in with this stencil, which I had, I think I changed my mind, so I was going to use that one. I do come back and use it here in a moment. Goodness, I just filmed this too. So this is a lace stencil from my stash. I apologize, I cannot tell you where I got it because I don't keep them in the packaging, and this one didn't have any place to write any name on it because there's really not a border on it. Usually I will just use a permanent marker, a Sharpie, and do that so that I can retain that who made it. So just coming in here, as you can see, with the black archival ink, just to create a different contrast, a different level of interest here. And in that spot, it was still a little bit wet. That Crackle Paint, I believe, is what's causing me the issue here. But again, in the whole scheme of things, it didn't really matter that I was not getting as good of an impression as you might think I was seeking. I just wanted to get some interest down. And I tried a couple of different stamps. This one was just way too little. So I tried it a couple of times and I move on to another stamp, and then that didn't work. And so the stamping was not very effective until this one. So these are, I will list them in the supply list. They're great mixed media stamps. I can't remember where they're from even off the top of my head, but I'll be sure to link them in case you want to check them out. So I'm just stamping those everywhere, and I'm going to go back and forth between several of those stamps that I showed you just a moment ago. And again, just still using the black archival ink for that contrast because we do still have a lot of light color in this. And I wanted to bring in some darker, some dark to balance that out. Just grabbed a stamp block really quick, and that would have probably helped me with the other stamps. I wasn't thinking about that because generally when I use stamps for mixed media, I don't put them on a block because I want to control the impression. I sometimes don't want a full impression. So I'm going to let you go ahead and watch this just for a few minutes, and I'm going to just turn the music on and I'll be back. So here's just another close-up of that texture with the with all of that stamping. I think it was just perfect. Super grungy though, but I adore it. I was really surprised by how it felt. Like, it just feels so soft. And so now I'm going to come back in with this kind of random word stencil. It's got the days of the week and other, other words like can and glorious and journal and open and jam and food and color and dream and all of that stuff, just to create a little bit more interest, kind of with some text. My stencil did move from time to time, and so some of my impressions were a little bit blurry, but again, we're just creating the illusion of some writing in the background, and it didn't need to be perfect to be effective. Coming in with and doing some splatter, excuse me. I'm using my black archival ink from Liquitex, and I'm finding a splatter brush here really quick, and I'm going to do some splattering with some black, and then I'll come in with some of the iridescent gold fine from Golden Fluid Acrylic, which you've seen me use in other projects. One of my favorite paints. I really like the effect that the gold and the black had, which again you'll be able to see not only in the photos at the end, but also in the over on my blog. So I do post more pictures over there. So here is the gold paint, and I'm just going to add some water to that, just because it is still a little bit thick. It's not as thin as an acrylic ink. So, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use the splatter brush and go ahead and splatter that. So while that is finishing, I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for stopping by. I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope that you're inspired to try something new. This is again a great way to get messy, a great way to experiment with some mixed media techniques without getting completely buried in it, because it can be overwhelming to know where to start with mixed media. So there are small things that you can do to get your feet wet and see if it's something that you even like. It might not be your jam, and that's perfectly okay. So anyway, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I'm going to go ahead and let you just finish watching, and I will see you in the next video.